Hello and welcome to another episode of One on One. I'm very excited to have with me today Emma Banks, VP of F&B Strategy and Development for EMEA at Hilton. Miss Banks.
Hi Seymone. At last.
I know. How exciting. We finally get to sit down and have a chat.
And thank you for coming to the beautiful Hilton Dubai Palm Jumeirah.
You know, I've always been curious about your journey and your history with hospitality. If we can, I'd like to go back a little bit.
Yeah,
what
sure.
drew you first?
You'll have to go back a long way.
I doubt that. I doubt that. But I want to know what drew you into hospitality from the beginning.
I think, like a lot of people, I started working in this business really young. And if I told you and your listeners that my first waitress job was at age 11, you would be shocked, wouldn't you? Well, I'm of that age when the employment in the UK for 16-year-olds and above hadn't come in. So I used to do summer jobs, waitressing, hustling away, earning my pocket money and saving up for things. And I then went on to university. And when I was at university, I had 3 jobs. I worked in a cafe, I worked in a cocktail bar. There's a song in there, as we know. And I also worked in like a traditional pub. I probably spent more time in hospitality than studying for my degree. Anyway, I got my degree by fair means or foul. And I worked in a couple of industries and I just kept getting drawn back to hospitality. So
why do you think that is?
I just love it. And it's served me well for 30 years. So I actually started working in the pub and nightclub scene in the UK and worked my way up through all the big pub groups, and then moved to the Middle East where I worked in food retail, and I went to Kuwait first, and then I was brought to work for Jumeirah here in the Middle East for 5 years, and then 6.5 years ago now I joined Hilton, and I haven't looked back. This is actually the longest tenure I've served in any company.
And why do you think that is?
It's been the top hospitality company for 8 years running, and there's so much about I love working about Hilton that I'm sure we'll get into, but I think it's a purpose-led company. It's inclusive, it's supportive, it's very commercial, it's fun, but most of all, it allows me to bring my authentic self to work and my team members. We get to travel, no 2 days are the same. We get to meet owners, team members, and it's a big role. So there's always so much to do. So it's always a challenge. I really enjoy it.
Let's talk a little bit about the vision and the strategy behind what you do with regards to Hilton's F&B.
Well, Hilton was founded by a very, very visionary leader and founder, Conrad Hilton, who truly believed, even over 100 years ago, that hospitality had the force to be good, in the world. And as Hilton team members, we live that every day, trying to bring the light and warmth of hospitality to our guests in our hotels. And in terms of food and drink, we really see that food and drink in our restaurant bars in our hotels being the real white space in hospitality.
Okay.
It's got the opportunity to be the real halo effect and differentiate our brands. So owners choose Hilton, our team members choose to work for us, and guests choose to stay with us.
Something very interesting that we were having a conversation about off camera was the use of the word food and beverage. And you said something very interesting to me, that throughout your organization, you actually call it food and drink. So not F&B, but F&D.
Well, in Hilton EMEA, my team, and I'm supported now, we call it food and drink.
Okay.
And the reason we call it food and drink is we believe in being relevant and speaking the language of the listener. And in EMEA, most people refer to it as food and drink. Consumer-facing magazines will say food and drink. The on-trade, so if you were thinking about search engine optimization and you put in food and drink, most of the time it would take you to the on-trade, and by that I mean restaurants and bars, consumer-facing. If you put in food and beverage, it will take you mostly to manufacturing or off-trade. And we think food and drink is relevant. It's what our guests would say. Would you like to go for a drink? what would you like to drink?
Right.
Do you fancy a drink? You know, so we feel it's about relevance and, you know, also for our team members as well.
That is very interesting. Now, my follow-up question, I'm going to do my best to refer to it as food and drink for the purpose of this interview.
We've got a long way to go.
But what makes a really not just good but great food and drink concept in your opinion?
A great concept starts with the plate or the glass.
Okay.
It's what, you know, people make the mistake of, oh, I'm going to have this decor and it's going to look like this and it's going to... Really true concepts start with, if you think about going to a restaurant or having a drink in a bar, it's, you know, the product is what have you got on that plate in front of you or what is in that glass. And for me, that's where the concept starts. It starts at the plate and it works out. So what's the menu design? What's the restaurant design? What's the uniform? What's the ambience? What's the average check? You know, what's the branding? And from that plate or glass, you start with the story. And having a great story and really being able to articulate your story through your food, your drink, everything, all the touch points in your restaurant, everything from your customer service journey to your branding, to your music, to your vibe, to your decor, to how the team members engage with you as a guest, to what the chef or the mixologist or the barista puts in that plate, glass or cup. So I believe it starts with the product, the plate, the storytelling, and then you work everything from there. Saying that, it has to be very defined and it has to be understood and it has to be relevant. You know, you have to be filling a gap or a demand in the market for consumers. What people can make the mistake of, especially in hotel restaurants and bars, is over time that concept not being defined and people adding and tweaking and touching. You've got to be true to the concept. And if you are going to reposition or rebrand, you've got to really make sure that that's a strategic decision and done very carefully. You know, don't just start winging items on the menu because you're under pressure or somebody said, oh, it'd be really nice if you had that in the concept. You know, does the brand and does the brand story allow you to make that change to the concept and direction? Of course, over time, fashions change, trends change, and food and drink is so trend-centric, and we know it moves very fast. You know, concepts may come and go, but really, really true defined brands will evolve, but they will stay true to the concept, they'll stay true to the plate, and they will actually evolve over time, but in a way that the brand allows it to.
Have you experienced any F&B concepts or gone to visit any restaurants lately that wowed you in this way and showed you that this restaurant really believes in its concept and is true to its concept? Can you give us like some great examples? Within Hilton if you want, or without.
Well, I can give you many, and I can give you within Hilton and outside of Hilton, but you know, if I was to say within Hilton, you know, last fall, you know, I went to the refurbished and reconcepted La Pergola at Waldorf Astoria, Rome Cavalieri, you know, and that's Rome's only 3-star Michelin restaurant by Heinz Beck, and it's, you know, been there many, many years. And that restaurant really, really stays true to its concept, you know, and to retain 3 stars for as many years as they have. And I was really, really wowed by that. You know, also let's think about in Dubai, you know, recently one of my hot favourites is Il Gattopardo at ICD Brookfield, you know, and you go in there and you immediately feel the vibe, you know, and you know what you've come in for, you know, you've come in for upscale New York Italian and the design and everything. But I think being true to the story and the concept's really, really, really important.
So I want to talk about people for a little bit. You said that Hilton has been voted one of the best places to work for a really long time. What do you think is the secret sauce of that? What do you guys do well? What is it that you're doing well?
I think it goes back to, you know, our president and our CEO, Kristen Setter, always talks about how we're a purpose-led organisation and that, you know, we're a company founded on culture. And that goes back to our founder's vision, you know, that as hoteliers, we have the responsibility to fill the world with the light and warmth of hospitality. And that starts by being hospitable and caring and inclusive to our own colleagues and team members. And that really does resonate through the whole organisation, you know, and we've been voted the #1 hospitality company 8 years in a row by Great Places to Work. And that isn't just hospitality, that's,
Yes,
you know, and currently in EMEA, for example, this year in 2025, we've been voted already the #1 place to work by Great Places to Work in 5 markets, Kuwait and Bahrain, the UK, for example, and then even in the US once again. So I think, you know, this is, and that's where team members vote us as that you know, it's done confidentially, and Great Places to Work let us know. I think it's really Laura Fuentes, who's our executive board member, human resources. She talks about being a very human-centric and, you know, human place to come where you can bring your authentic self. And so it really does come from the top, from our founding vision, right from the top. You know, and we're all measured and KPI'd. Every year our team members, you know, do an anonymous survey where they talk about, you know, what they like about Hilton, what are the opportunities, you know, do they feel they can bring their authentic self to work? Do they feel comfortable talking about their mental health? You know, how you know, we have a program called Thrive, which is very much about mind, body and soul, and how we can show up at work as our best selves but still have a good work-life balance. And quite honestly, my team work really, really hard, but we are encouraged to just make sure that we do try and adapt. It's sometimes harder to achieve with travel and stuff, but, you know, I'm very fortunate that, you know, I get that time to disconnect and make sure that I do my crazy
it is
spin
important
class in the morning.
I love those, by the way.
Yeah, to burn off that you know, and just feel that I can turn up as my best self. And even when I'm traveling, you know, I try and make time to either walk and get some fresh air or go to a cycle class.
You've mentioned this twice now, and I'd like to get you to give me a little bit more meat on that, because I think it's important to you, because you said it a few times.
Oh, right.
Bring your authentic self to work. It's very important. What does that mean?
Well, what that means in Hilton is, you know, and then I'll talk about what it means to Emma Banks. Well, in Hilton, what it means is that, you know, we truly believe, if we're really inclusive, you know, and if you're going to show up and not be your authentic self, that's exhausting. You know, that's already taking some of your energy and, you know, your brain power. So if people can come as themselves, obviously being respectful, working within our vision and values, and obviously being culturally relevant and respectful. But, you know, if you can come to work as your authentic self, that means that you can just be yourself, you can be relaxed, and you can give your best self at work, you know, without finding that energy to be something you're not. So I think it's very much around, you know, it's not only is it you know, inclusive, but it actually helps drive performance as well. It makes sense. What it means for me personally, I've been in this business a while, and, you know, I've worked through very different times, and sometimes being a woman in food and drink and in hospitality has never been easy.
Of course.
And you've tried to get on by adopting personas or working in a way or conducting yourself in a way that you think is going to fare you well. The reality is it doesn't. And, you know, I've sometimes been considered to be a little bit of an outsider, or, you know, I have many times been to meetings and been on teams where I have been the sole woman. And, you know, that's not the end of the world, but in times gone by, it wasn't easy. So for me, it's really important. And, you know, now I dress a little bit differently maybe from a lot of hoteliers. I mean, fashion is a real passion of mine. Don't tend to wear a blue suit, but that's okay. And that's, you know, I'm accepted for that, you know, and I really enjoy the fact that I can be myself. You know, I can be Emma at Hilton, and, you know, I can be that crazy food and drink person that's constantly banging on about food and drink. And, you know, because of course, in hospitality, you are a business within a big rooms business.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm the one fighting my corner for food and drink, though I am very supported in the EMEA region. But you are the baby sister, so you kind of have to remind everybody that food and drink's there, differentiating our brands, creating a halo effect, giving guests personalisation. We are the fun part of the business, you know, the tip of the spear.
I really appreciate that answer, because I was just, a thought came to mind. You allowing yourself to be Emma Banks is inspirational to other women in hospitality, because it gives them sort of the permission to also be their authentic self and show up authentically to work every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think women nowadays, I mean, especially women in hospitality, I'm blown over. It's like, you know, I travel the world and I meet team members in all different cultures, and, you know, on my team, Nikki supports us, and, you know, we have a saying, if you can see it, you can be it. And, you know, it's great for me, because when I go to the hotels and I talk, you know, we've got a program called Hilton Chefs Inclusion Program, where we believe, you know, we want to try and make our kitchens the most inclusive in the world, and that's not just on gender, that's on abilities, that's on ethnicities. In culinary, we do have a long way to go till we have full gender balance in kitchens. So when I'm going around the hotels and I get to talk to our leaders and to our culinary leaders and to our kitchen team members, you know, and I do a lot of talking to aspiring women chefs through our Hilton Chefs Inclusion Program. It feels real and authentic, and they often say to me, because you're a woman and you're out there doing it, and thank you. And I'm very fortunate through my personal platform, LinkedIn, which is my favourite platform, sometimes on Instagram, but I do get a lot of people reach out to me. I once had a woman who wrote to me, and she said, you know, I was a chef I left the industry about 15 years ago. She says, but I think, you know, if you've been around talking about what you talk about now, I might not have left. And I had a father that wrote to me on LinkedIn, and, you know, he was from a completely different industry. And he said, thank you so much. I have a young daughter that's aspiring for an industry, you know, to be a chef, and just seeing what you're doing is really encouraging. So, you know, when I have people writing to me, and I've had quite a few chefs write to me and say, thanks, I've been seen. And, you know, that's so powerful. And I share it with my team and I say, see, we are making a difference. We're cutting through the noise.
Let's talk a little bit about sustainability, because I know that is a very important pillar for you at Hilton, especially within F&D.
I do think we are industry leading and potentially, you know, creating a blueprint for the industry for the better. And, you know, that started in many guises, but one way it started was when we were inspired by the United Nations Environment Programme West Asia launching their Recipe of Change programme, and we came to understand about Recipe of Change and how to make small changes within the HoReCa sector and within the hotel sector to reduce food waste. And the team came up with the concept of Green Ramadan.
Okay.
And we launched Green Ramadan in 2023 in 3 hotels across 3 markets. And we achieved, I want to say, a 61 or 62, it was definitely one of those, waste reduction, grams per cover per guest over a 4-week period. We then went on in 24 to do 14 hotels in 7 countries, including Malaysia, and we improved our food waste results again. And in 25, we've just launched across 46 hotels in 14 countries, and we've had our best results ever. And across there, we've made learnings on, you know, how we do our mise en place, how we prepare our iftar and suhoor buffets, how we train our team members, our guest messaging, you know, how we are more plant forward, how we do anything to avoid food going to landfill, through that be, you know, reduce, reuse, repurpose,
'Cause that is a big problem.
go to landfill, UAE food banks, etc., etc. And we've done that so well. But interesting, the first Green Ramadan, we then went and worked on green breakfast in the UAE, and that was with 13 hotels in the UAE, where we adopted the same principles, the full circular, you know, taking lots of initiatives to avoid food going to food waste, as well as changing how we operated. And we went to COP28 with the United Nations to talk about green breakfast. We have food waste reduction programs in all our kitchens across EMEA. We are in just shy of 200 hotels with Wimo, which is our AI food waste technology partner. It's a platform that allows us to get data and insights to actually help us reduce our food waste. And then, you know, local sourcing. We track our local sourcing in our markets, but we laser. I think we're now having full percentage data on 10 markets, expanding to 13, where we know full supplier sourcing, and we can genuinely say, for example, here in the UAE, a couple of years ago, we were pretty much at zero. We're now at 37% local sourcing, which represents about 900 tonnes.
That's amazing.
In Netherlands and UK, we're well north of 50. So local sourcing is really big for us as well as responsible sourcing.
Emma, if you can, you mentioned your food wastage programs. If you can tell me, like very high level, what are some of the items on that program?
It's actually a brand standard for our hotels to have a food wastage reduction program. And many years ago, prior to my time actually, Hilton worked with the World Wildlife Fund to create a toolkit to support the chefs and the kitchen teams to look at ways to reduce food. And that can be around, you know, how we source, making sure that you're not overbuying, overproducing, you know, your simple things, FIFO, first in, first out, in terms of stock rotation, mise en place, not over-preparing. Now, we've obviously developed it. It's a lot more sophisticated now. We've got proper SOPs. We've got technology helping us. We're weighing and measuring. We now track through Lightstay, which is our ESG platform, and you know, we track our food waste grams per cover by hotel, and we produce a Lightstay food waste report every month that hotels can see how they're performing and can track, you know, on average per customer, per cover, what food waste they're generating. So, and then they can, you know, they get data and insights, team training. We know one time, you know, we talk about trends, excess, you know, foams, quenelles, swishes, garnishes, you know, beautiful garnishes, inedible garnishes that were just left on the plate. Now we know that the trends through, you know, Chef Wojtek, or indeed, you know, the gentleman who has the restaurant Silo in London, Chef McMaster, you know, it's around actually how do you use that whole plant?
Exactly.
How do you use that whole protein? And chefs are taking a new sort of code of honour and developing sustainable gastronomic techniques. How do you use the whole fruit? So, for example, with us now, some of the innovations we've taken, you know, for example, banana scones, dried, converted into a powder, used in baking. Leftover bread and pastries from breakfast buffet, used to make umali, to make puddings, to make crumbs. Discarded fruit, hydrated, sent to our bars for our mixologists to use. Reduction of garnishes in drinks. Drinks now the trend. Simple glassware, beautiful ice, great technique, and it's all in the technique and skill of food preparation and production, technique and skill of drinks, minimal garnishes. You know, consumers, there's mindful consumerism about, you know, let's try not to waste on the plate, and let's not leave half a garden in a cocktail nowadays, you know. And, you know, so these are all the initiatives we're taking in our hotels to reduce food waste.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think you guys are doing a fantastic job.
The hotel teams are, and the chefs are indeed, yes.
I've had this conversation a few times with industry professionals about how to, not even about whose problem it is. It's not the guest problems or the hospitality problem, but usually when a lot of these sustainability surveys are done, a lot of consumers feel like it is hotels' responsibility or hospitality's responsibility to reduce food waste, and hospitality feels like consumers also need to play their part. What is your take on that?
It is our responsibility to fill the world with the light and warmth of hospitality, and if that means that we have to give guests default choices to make more conscious menu and mindful choices, we have the responsibility to do that. So that's training our team members to speak and engage with the guests. It's about how we present our buffets. It's about how we slice and dice, how we portion our food, more individual portions. So guests, by default, they don't even know they're doing it. Do it. but also it's about, you know, publishing our light stay reports, engaging with our guests, allowing our guests, you know, showing up where you know, storytelling around local produce, storytelling about our hydroponic farms on site, storytelling about how the UAE now is home to a really, really big growing local produce economy through ag tech. But at the end of the day, it's also about that mindful messaging and nudges and behavioural interventions, and allowing the guests to make those decisions by sharing the information. Without, you know, we've got to make sure we've got to balance the guest experience as well. I mean, take the breakfast buffet. You know, people who don't even eat breakfast in their lives when they go to a hotel are eating like it's their last meal on life, you know? It's like, it's such a big, and we know from our guest feedback that the breakfast is absolutely key to the stay. It's often the last meal our guests will have before they leave the hotel, or it's the meal that sets them up for the day, or if they're on a leisure break, they have a late leisurely breakfast, you know, and eat more than they would ever at home. But, you know, it's also allowing them to make those choices. So, for example, making our croissants smaller, because our data showed us how many grams per croissant we were throwing away. So what did Chef Sebastian do? He trained the chefs and led the chefs to actually make this croissants. I think it was 11 grams smaller. You know, it's about how when we slice our loaves, you know, we slice them and then quarter them. So if a guest is going to take a piece of, say, date cake, for example, they take a quarter and they're satisfied.
Yeah, exactly.
If they took the half, they probably would have left some. Yeah. So it's just by helping the guests. It's not about bashing them up and saying, you know, you must be more mindful, you know, and it's your responsibility that we're throwing all this food in the bin. Yeah. But we do have some fun in our group meeting and event stuff. You know, guests, group meeting and events, meeting bookers the world over are really, really, because they work for companies, they come from businesses that have their own sustainability targets and their own, you know, they have to declare their own carbon footprints as an organisation. So you've got companies looking to book meetings and events at companies that can help them achieve a reduction in their carbon footprint. So how do we show up in that in terms of our food and drink strategy? We have our 50-mile menu. We give guests the option to choose menus that we say everything that you're going to serve at your lunch or dinner will be within 50 miles of this hotel. We have binless events. Oh, you want to see it when guests, I've been to them myself, and you know that you are not allowed to scrape your plate, or your plate cannot be taken away empty. You really think about what you're putting on it. Yeah. So you do actually have, we have events that choose to have meat-free meals, and then we can give them the carbon footprint reduction. Not the whole event, just maybe one lunch. It makes a big difference.
Would you agree that the more you measure your food wastage, the more you can understand it and obviously implement it?
Data and insights is key, absolutely key, which is why if you understand where it's coming from, you can then and you know, we are supported by our partners at Winnow, at United Nations, by our own ESG team within Hilton. You know, you can then make the actions, and you can train the team members, and you know, you can understand the data and insights points you where. So for example, you know, we know in Ramadan on our iftar buffets when we first started, our biggest places of waste was actually bread and bakery to start with. So we just reduced that.
Right.
I think one hotel in our first ever Ramadan, Green Ramadan in 2023, the Waldorf Astoria Lusail, it completely changed how it did the bread and bakery at iftar. It reduced its plate waste by 74%.
Wow.
Just by doing that.
74%?
Yeah, because that's where the biggest amount, because guests did massive bread baskets and everything, and then filled their plates up, and of course never touched the bread baskets. Right. So we moved apart from the Arabic bread, we made the bread a la carte, available on request, and of course then it came to the guests cooked fresh and hot, and they actually ate it. And those that weren't going to eat it didn't pick it up from the buffet by default. So it's just getting that data and insights allows you to make these decisions.
It's incredible insight what it does and how it changes things.
Yeah.
Let's move on to leadership before we get into the final few fun little this and that questions.
Okay.
If I was to ask a couple of the members on your team what kind of leader you are,
what
do you think they say?
Always striving for the next thing.
Okay.
you know, and I have to pace myself and make sure, you know, and I'm a lot more disciplined at that, you know, because I came from a very entrepreneurial background, you know, I came from private equity and VC, you know, and it was always like move, next thing. And Hilton's a big organisation, so I've got to pace, so always striving for the next thing. I think very clear and very direct, challenging. I think I'm always there for my team. I think what they'd probably say is I'd be late for my own funeral as well.
Now we're going to get to the part of the session where we're going to do a couple of this or that questions with you. It's your last meal on planet Earth. What are you having?
Beef rendang.
Okay. What's your favorite hotel amenity?
Oh gosh. Honest answer, access to lots of chilled water.
Okay. Early check-in or late check-out? What do you...
Early check-in.
Okay. Final one. What's your go-to room service order?
Chicken Caesar salad.
Chicken.
Dry white wine, sparkling water.
I like how you roll.
Not very exciting, but there we go.
Thank you so much, Miss Banks. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thanks, Seymone. Thank you so much. I'm glad we made it happen.
I'm super glad we made this happen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.